Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Let's get back to Iraq. This gentleman in the picture here is a religious leader. He is telling both the Coordination Framework and the Solder and the Solder's movement group, they better figure things out and get along before the majority become the minority. He's a very holy man, and people do listen to him. But let's get into some other things that we should be paying attention to because it affects the world, actually. Before we get started, hit the thumbs up button. If you are not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. Right now is a great time to buy the shine. That's right, buy gold and silver over at Money Metals Exchange. The link is down below in the description. If you are a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code Pimpy, P-I-M-P-Y, and you'll get a free half ounce of silver. Looky here, we have the advisor to Al-Qademi. Iraq is in an excellent financial position, and it is time to quickly approve the budget. So even though an election has happened and we don't have all the people in the proper places, there still is an interim government led by, of course, Al-Qademi. The financial advisor to Al-Qademi, we're talking about Soleil, told the news Iraq is in an excellent financial position at this present time, as during the past month, oil revenues increased to $11 billion. And this is a very large number that has not been recorded for 5 decades. He stressed that this is a positive aspect regardless of the profitability of the economy. Soleil went on to say, we imagine that it is time to present the financial budget law as soon as possible, especially since its draft for the 2022 has been prepared for a long time and can be submitted, and some amendments made to it. The Ministry of Oil on the 1st of this April announced that it had expected more than 100 million barrels during the month of March, achieving revenues that exceeded $11 billion, which is the highest financial revenues achieved since 1972. And good Lord, 1972 compared to where we are now. So you can imagine what was really going on in 72, that they were able to pay out over $11 billion in oil. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, I agree with Soleil. It's time to go ahead and get the budget passed, man. Get things crack-a-lacking. If you pass this budget, that forces the government, once they are finally established, it forces them to continue with the reform agenda, at least for the year 2022. Now, there are other articles down here, but nothing that I want to cover at the moment. Let's get into this right here. What does Russia's war in Ukraine mean for Iraq? Well, it says since Russia had invaded the Ukraine on February 23rd, Iraq has refrained from taking a firm position on the war. On February 28th, Iraq voted for an Arab League statement on Ukraine that did not assign responsibility to Russia. Iraq abstained from the March 2nd UN General Assembly vote that condemned Russia's aggression towards Ukraine and merely expressed regret about the deterioration of the situation and the escalating tension between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Iraq justified its abstention by highlighting the risk of terrorists capitalizing on the polarization within the international community and noting its historic background, which includes suffering resulting from the continuing war against our people. Well, of course, Iraq isn't going to say anything about Russia because they have plans to do business together in the future. They want to buy weapons from them. They're supposed to help with other trade things as well as help with infrastructure. I can imagine them shooting themselves in the foot. For what reason? Notwithstanding these official statements, political opinions in Iraq on Russia's conduct is divided along partisan and factional lines. Yep, just like we have them here. The imposition of sanctions against Russia has complicated its energy investment in Iraq, and prospective arms purchase from Moscow could have a long-lasting adverse impact on Iraq's economy. Yeah, that's why you're not going to hear them say anything. They got all kinds of deals in the works with Russia, and the last thing they want to do is talk crap about them before these deals are carried out. So here's the thing, you got to remember that you got the Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF, which they've actually been buddy-buddy with Russia. And we're talking about, what does it say? An umbrella organization of 40 mostly Shiite militia, is the most sympathetic bloc to Russia's policies in Ukraine, as it regularly engages with Moscow with Syria and counterterrorism. An official from the political office of the PMF warned that the British and Americans will harness the experience forming gangs, mafias, and death squads in Iraq, in Honduras, and Ukraine. Other Iran aligned militia figures were more measured in their embrace of pro Kremlin narratives. Its Secretary General acknowledged that the U.S. forced Russia's hand into a war, but also claimed that Russia is no less bloody than Europe and the U.S., and said that it would need a miracle to win the war due to sanctions. The only comment that Sauter had about the whole thing is he said it's absolutely useless. Iraq can relate to what's going on with Russia, actually, in many different ways. You got to remember that Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi wanted to go to the gold dinar, is what they did, and then all of a sudden we have regime change. All of a sudden this magical thing popped up, and then they claimed there was an invasion, and then we went and removed the two leaders of these countries just because they wanted to get away from the petrodollar. Now, Russia is doing the same thing, and of course now we have this whole issue with the UN putting missiles within Ukraine, along with a bunch of other criminal things that are going on. And Russia said, nah, we're not having it no more. And they defended themselves. But that's not what the media is going to tell you. The Iraqi public also disagrees on the merits of the Ukraine war. A poster saying we support Russia, surrounded by large portraits of Vladimir Putin. Is it just outside the United States that understands what's really going on? We have people within our own Congress that understand what's going on. Let's listen to this because he ties it into what happened in Iraq.
Joe Kent has seen this story before. He is a retired Green Beret. He's running for Congress in the state of Washington. He joins us tonight. Joe, thanks so much for coming on. It's almost unfair to hold up media lunacy as if it matters. It's just that all of a sudden it seems like it does matter. And it seems like intemperate, reckless nihilists in Washington are pushing the administration toward what could be a true disaster.
Yeah, absolutely, Tucker. I mean, the rhetoric coming from the media, coming from the national security state, and many of our elected officials is just completely irresponsible for all the reasons that you outlined. What I want to call people's attention to is that, hey, we are the Iraq war generation. We've seen this movie before recently. Yeah. Many of us, like myself, we went, we fought. I lost my late wife fighting in these conflicts. We know exactly how we were lied to. We could lay it out chapter and verse, the lies that the media told, the lies that the administration told. Everyone can regurgitate those right now, and we're seeing it all being paired right now in this Ukraine war. And
do you see what he's saying? Because we all remember that, oh, weapons of mass destruction. Oh, then all of a sudden you got Bush making a joke about it because they knew in advance. They just don't want these people switching from the petrodollar to the euro for their oil. And because of that, we lost two leaders. And those two leaders of their countries, you know, here's the thing. Whatever is going on in these countries, that's on them. The people need to rise up, but they don't like it. We shouldn't be nosing in other people's business. But if we're going to nosy in other people's business, then do it across the board. Just don't pick what country's got resources that you like and want, and then go in and do something. Just like, you know, it's still upsetting that we haven't done anything about the Uyghurs in China, but they want to complain about what's going on over there in Ukraine. Nah, there's a lot of stuff going on there with our own government that's criminal. They don't want it exposed. But yeah, there's a lot of parallel similarities between what happened in Iraq and what we're seeing right now in the whole Russia-Ukraine war.
In this effort to get us into a conflict with Russia. So I think we need our lawmakers to actually respect the American people enough to come back to their districts, Congress, like the Constitution says, and to tell everyone what's going to happen. If we're going to continue to sanction Putin, if we're going to continue to call him a war criminal like we did with Gaddafi and with Saddam, if we're going to continue to send $14 billion of our own money over to Ukraine so that they can fight Russia, what's going to happen? What are the possible scenarios? If we continue to push the Russian economy into the arms of the Chinese Communist Party, what's going to happen to our economy? None of these discussions are being had. Instead, we're watching the road to the Iraq War Part 2, except for this time it might be World War III, as opposed to a prolonged insurgency.
And there's much less debate even than there was in 2002 and 2003. I was involved in that debate. I was on the wrong side, I'm afraid.
No, that's because when Russia got into the Ukraine, they started destroying the labs. They brought up a lot of proof that the United States is funding lab work just like they were doing in China for a different type of variant, and they didn't want that truth to come out.
Embarrassed to admit, but I watched it, and there were a lot of strong and sensible voices on both sides. I don't see any voices on the other side. People are so intimidated of being called pro-Putin, even those of us who have zero interest in Putin or Russia, could care less, only care about the United States. Why aren't we do what you just said, a very clear explanation for what this will cost, how it benefits us, why we would do this? What the hell are they even talking about?
I think right now there's a lot of very cold and calculating people in our political apparatus right now that they know that war and this desire for us to be on the right side, this narrative is very compelling and very powerful for Americans. It allows them to distract from all of their other failings. The country is in a bad way right now. It was in a bad way before everything that happened in Ukraine. And the easiest thing to do is to saber rattle and to let this expansion continue towards war, as opposed to addressing the real problems that we're having right now with.
Oh, that is so true. Any kind of distraction before midterms, they're gaming for it. They'll stretch this out as long as possible.
With our economy, with our southern border, all of the above. It's much easier for them just to saber rattle us towards war for their own political gain. But these people cannot be trusted. We need to be demanding that our elected officials, our congressmen and our congresswomen come back to their districts and explain to the American people what's happening right now. I was really frustrated to see that only a handful of Republicans today and a few Democrats actually stood up and voted against further sanctions against Russia just because of the ramifications of further isolating Russia and exacerbating this conflict.
Yeah, and hurting our economy, but this is one of those cases where right-wing media sounds exactly the same as liberal media, or Kevin McCarthy is exactly the same as Nancy Pelosi. That should make normal people very, very, very nervous.
I agree.
I know it makes
That's
you
right. We've seen this movie before. Everyone can tell exactly what happened with the Iraq War, and most recently, the COVID narrative, January 6th, the election, Hunter's laptop. The list of lies just go on and on. We have every right. As a matter of fact, I would say that every American has a responsibility right now to question what's coming from the media and to question what's coming from our elected officials.
Woo, man, I couldn't agree more. Oh, 100% aboard with that. What we don't want to do is get ourselves involved in a so-called conflict, claiming that we're doing it for all the righteous reasons, only to find out that that's not the truth. The Biden family are being exposed over there, and they don't want that to happen, not to mention the fact that Obama helped finance some lab work that's over there. They're not going to allow that to. They don't want that kind of truth to come out. That's why all of a sudden you see magically Obama back in the White House. Anyways, that's it for now. Let me know what you think. Hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. And I'll catch you later. I'm out.